And good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you may be. My dear colleagues, I am your host, Joe Basha. I'm here with my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Samir Patel, a perfusionist extraordinaire, recently board certified by
Yep.
the ABCP.
Yep.
So he's very proud of that. We're very proud of you as well.
Thank you so much.
And it was touch and go though for a while.
It was.
We were very concerned.
I myself was worried.
We were
I was
quite
like, there's no
concerned.
way I can do this. There's no way I'm going to make it.
But you did it.
But I did it, Joe.
You did it.
Big mountain.
Well, happy to have you. So let's get through our housekeeping notes if we can. Contact us at contact@perfusioneducation.com. We monitor that email every day. So if you have an idea or a question or a thought, or you want to be part of our programming, you are more than welcome to reach out to us there. I know that I've had a few people reach out, and we're going to have some guests speakers that are going to be coming up very soon. In fact, I will tell you that, kind of getting off track of my opening statements here, but and on January, we're going to be opening up the new MediWeb network, which is going to have a whole variety of programs on it, designed for perfusionists, nurses, critical care nurses, and nurse ECMO specialists. So you're going to see a lot of this new programming coming along, which I think you're going to find very interesting and unique.
Mm-hmm.
And tomorrow starts our adult ECMO specialist course, which is a course that is not endorsed by, so we have to be very careful with our language here, not endorsed by ELSO, but is accepted by ELSO because of the standards that we have as being an appropriate course to give you eligibility to take the ELSO Adult ECMO Specialist exam. And that's a distinction that I'm quite proud of, and that was the work of Vicki Carlisle, who you will see tomorrow during that program if you're going to be doing the ECMO Specialist course.
Mm-hmm.
It's both a didactic and a simulation, and of course you can do only the didactic, but you cannot just do only the simulation. But you can do the full course, which is really a very comprehensive course. You can take a look at it, go to mediweb.us, and pull up Adult ECMO Specialist course, and you can learn all about it. The crawl bar down below that you're going to see, that is going to be there intermittently throughout the lectures today. And you can go there and follow us on Facebook and Twitter, what used to be Twitter. Now it's XYZ or whatever it's called. And then we have LinkedIn, and then we have a variety of other things. But it's all on the crawl bar there. You can just go to those things, click it. We appreciate subscribes, likes, follows, shares. All of those things go a very long way to helping us continue with this programming. Recently, we were monetized by YouTube, believe it or not, and I think we made $1.87, which was just amazing. I couldn't believe it.
Best $1.87 ever.
I'm telling you right now, I'm going to take that $1.87. It's going right into that retirement fund
There
that
you
I have.
go.
Exactly. And then we'll take a look at our MediWeb app, and I am going to bring that up so we can take a look at it, as a matter of fact. And if you go to the Google Play Store, you go to the Apple App Store, whatever version that you use, this app really has quite a bit on it. And you can see it there on the left. It's the MediWeb Critical Care Application app for perfusionists, but it's also appropriate for nurses in the critical care unit. It's also appropriate for ECMO specialists. You can see the various categories we have. And I can just give you some interesting things. We'll just say it's perfusion. We'll go to the perfusion quick calcs. That's really easy, but you can see here all of the various things that we do have on this, which is quite a bit. You can just do something very quickly if you wanted to. If you're during a case and you want to do your DO2 index and your hemoglobin is 8 and your SaO2 is 100 and your PaO2 is 260 and you're flowing 4.2 and your patient's BSA is 2.1, you're going to have a DO2I of 233, which is well under that 280 threshold that we talk about. So you're going to have to do something different. Now,
Oh, more.
my lecture is actually going to be very appropriate for this, and I may pull it up during the lecture because sometimes we are going to be suboptimal. But
Mhm.
that's getting ahead of ourselves here. But what can you do in this circumstance? Well, I mean, the one thing you can do is obviously flow more. So
Yep.
let's say we go to
The easiest.
4.8,
That should do it right there.
and that will still only get you to
No,
267. So really, if you have a lot of volume and you can hemoconcentrate and you get the hemoglobin up to 9,
Mm.
that's probably going to make all the difference in the world, and it gets you to
There you go.
298. Now, 280 is that minimum threshold. There's an awful lot of data out there that suggests 320 is really way more appropriate. And if you think about it, what is really optimal for us? Well, I'm just going to, put on here my hemoglobin is roughly 15. I'll just give myself a crappy PO2 and just instead of making it that, I'll make it 90, 96. And I'm sure my cardiac output is 5 liters a minute.
Your saturation is probably not 100.
And
It's probably a little less.
yeah, we'll just make my saturation 97.
There you go.
And my BSA is 2.2. I know I carry the weight well. But that gives me 456. That's even that is still under what is considered normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you come over here and this gives you tap this
500, I
little
think,
button
right?
right up here on the right, the I, and it
Wow.
tells you what the formula is. It goes through the whole thing.
550.
And my O2 oxygen delivery index should be between 550 and 650. And because it's 456, it's still abnormal. So my cardiac output's probably higher than 5, probably closer to 6. I underestimated it. And even that's still not enough. So, I need to lose some weight. That's basically what it's going to come down to. If I lost some weight, I had a BSA of only 1.9. Let's see how much better I would do. Calculate. Oh, I'm better now.
Yeah, you're much
Okay,
better.
so Joe needs to go on a diet.
There
That's
you go.
it. Okay. But if you look at your perfusion quick calcs when you go in the morning, you have a male. He's 56 years old. His pre-op hematocrit is, we'll say, 36. He's been in the hospital, so they've diluted him. His height in centimeters is 180. His weight is, we're going to say it's 89 kilos.
There you go.
Pump prime is going to be, by the time you do everything you're going to do, we'll call it 750. We'll make it really small.
Oh my God.
Anesthesia volume is always excessive. I'm going to just put a liter just to be nice to them. Pre-op urine output, you calculate that.
100
It's
ml.
500 cc's. Your heparin dose is at 3 per kilo. If you want to change that, you can, and make it 4 per kilo if you prefer. And you click calculate, and it gives you your BSA, your BMI, your estimated blood volume, red cell volume, heparin dose, estimated pump on crit, protamine dose, which we put that in there, but actually it really doesn't belong there if you think about it. We shouldn't be thinking about protamine. That's one of my other lectures before you even go on pump. And then all of your flows from an index of 1.6 to 3.0. You're getting ready to transport an ECMO, and you ask yourself, do I have enough oxygen in my tank? Pressure left is 1500. Your flow rate is at 4 liters, and you will have 130 minutes of gas left in your E-tank. So there's, and I can go on and on. There's a lot of different things you can look at. I would certainly, it's $2.99. It's a bargain as far as I'm concerned. We should have charged $29.99, but we didn't. And it's $2.99. So I would get it while you can, because as it continues to be sold and continues to gain in popularity, eventually I am going to go up on the price of it, because we're going to be doing some updates, and it includes all updates. There's also a standalone app, which is kind of interesting, which is incorporated in that app, which is the IV drug dose calculator, and that's very good for nursing. So if you're a nurse ECMO specialist, that's something that would really benefit, I think, you in particular. But if you have a spouse that's a nurse and you're a perfusionist, then I would certainly consider looking at that standalone app, which is only 99 cents, and it gives you a lot of information, including allowable blood loss before you need to transfuse. So a lot of neat stuff. Our podcasts are aired on every one of the different platforms: Spotify, Podbean, whatever else there is out there. I know there's a lot of them. I really don't know what they are. But you can listen to us at your convenience, or you can listen to us live while you're in the car. They're all aired. They're live, right? They're all recorded. So they're all recorded. So you can listen to this program at some other time if you want to. Okay. So let's delve into our lecture if we can. And our lecture today is on optimal perfusion and management of suboptimal states during cardiopulmonary bypass. So I'm going to start by basically saying that the most optimal perfusion using the cardiopulmonary bypass circuit, heart-lung machine, whichever you want to refer to it as, is anything but optimal. So just by virtue of going on cardiopulmonary bypass, you are already committed to a very suboptimal state. And that is not only because of an acute loss of pulsatile flow or a pulse, which people argue that, well, total artificial hearts are made continuous, and there's really, capillary flow is all continuous by the time it gets to that level. There's a lot of other reasons why we have a pulse, not to belabor all of them, but one of the key things is surplus dynamic energy. And when your heart ejects and your blood vessels, your arterial vessels expand, they then contract, and that contraction is actually contributory to the flow to your microcirculatory system. Correct. And so, or surplus hemodynamic energy would be more appropriate. But so, we take that away. We have hemodilution that's going to occur. We have contact with foreign surfaces. We have usually, unless the patient is already in cardiogenic shock, where you're actually improving their cardiac output, most of the time we're not flowing nearly as much as we should. And there's a lot of things I'm going to talk about because we discuss these protocols where you have an index that you are not to go under. And with the EMR systems that are being implemented, people are being evaluated on how often, if ever, and if they are, for how long, they are below this arbitrary number, right. Not taking into consideration that the cardiopulmonary bypass portion of the procedure that we're doing is there to facilitate the procedure being performed. And there's an awful lot of things happening in this rather confined space of the mediastinum where you try keeping that flow at that level at all cost, and the operation can't be completed safely or accurately. So there's a real balance here, and I think that is lost in a lot of these protocols that are being written by people who have no real idea of what it is we do. What's your thoughts on that?
I've said it before in one of my lectures, right? You have to treat the patient, right? You can't treat numbers. You can't let numbers guide the way you go. Yes, they're a guideline, but in essence, you have to look at all the different parameters you're dealing with. You got to look at history, all right? Like, if sometimes patients can handle lower flow states if they're used to lower flow states, right, Joe? I mean,
yes, it's called adaptation.
Exactly. So if in those cases, then a 1.8 index isn't the lowest you can go, or a 1.6. Maybe you can, perfuse adequately at a lower because his body's just used to it. So, I mean, I've said it before in my lectures, you can't really, each patient is unique. For us to come up with numbers it's silly. I mean, because each person is unique. Their pathologies are unique. Their collection of pathologies are unique. A guy with just hyperlipidemia and blood pressure is different than a guy with diabetes and blood pressure.
Or
So
somebody with ESRD.
exactly.
I'm not really going to be that concerned about whether I protect their kidneys or not.
Exactly.
They don't have any.
Because they don't have any. So does it matter? Like if you're flowing your 1.6 or maintaining that map of 60, like they say, as long as you're perfusing the brain and your brain stats are good, then you're probably okay.
Yeah, and that's not even, the kidneys are very sensitive, but that's not the most sensitive. There's something else that gets.
I bet you're probably going to get into that.
I'm going to get into that. You're
I know
right.
you are.
The brain is important, but it is not the.
It auto-regulates in a pretty big range,
and it's going to take the last mole of oxygen that exists. It's going to take it, and not give it to anybody else.
Right.
So we're going to go over understanding optimal perfusion in a suboptimal environment to begin with, achieving optimal perfusion, whatever we're going to end up calling that when this is all said and done. But what do you do when optimal perfusion is what you determine to be optimal perfusion? Again, what do you do when that's just simply not possible? And then what are the clinical outcomes and what is the evidence that says do this and it's acceptable, do this and it's not acceptable? And sometimes you just have no choice but to do what's unacceptable. But how do you then modify what you do later to recover from that? And I would want everyone that's listening to this today to kind of think to themselves how often you have seen a patient in extremis. They go in for a cath and they perforate a coronary and they end up fibrillating and they are doing CPR and they're doing everything they can to resuscitate this patient. And I think everyone would agree that under the best of circumstances, CPR is far less optimal than our least optimal bypass perfusion, but it is what it is, right? It's enough. And these patients go into tremendous deficits. And eventually something happens to get all of that stabilized. And these patients survive and go home with normal heart function, normal kidney function. Maybe it took a little bit of a hit, but it's not clinically significant. They might be a little bit different. Maybe they lost a couple of neurons. There's a whole bunch of them up there, and they tend to rework themselves. But maybe they have some injury, but that injury is really not clinically noticeable, and they're living pretty much their normal life. And you're like, how in the hell did this person survive? How did they survive this? So I want you to think about that for a minute when we get into this and start talking about some of these anomalous conditions where optimal perfusion is just impossible to do. Or even if it's not impossible to do, by doing it, you're hindering the procedure versus facilitating the procedure. So what is the gold standard for CPB management? Well, a map of equal or greater than 65, unless, right, 65 is fine unless you have bilateral carotid stenoses. That may not really be optimal, but these are the published information.
Well, what if you're at 32 degrees?
Right. Well, but pressure and flow are not the same thing.
They're not.
To assure full autoregulation throughout the entire organism, 65 is the threshold.
Okay.
So that's where that number actually derives from. Lactates to remain either equal to or less than 2. Who measures lactates on bypass? It's very infrequent. Urine output of 0.5 milliliters per kilogram per hour, though there's a whole cornucopia of data out there that says urine output is not a good surrogate for evaluating renal perfusion. Arterial saturations, you want them equal or greater than 95%. That makes sense, although how many ECMOs do we run where we accept 78, 81, 82? so that we can have uber lung protective strategies a lot. And you can actually live really well with a arterial saturation of 80 as long as you have good flow, good cardiac output.
Mhm.
Arterials pH based, your base basically to be, plus or minus 3, -3 to +3.
Mhm.
SVO2 greater than or equal than 70, equal or greater than 70%, and core temperature maintained within plus or minus 1 degree of target temperature, whatever that target temperature is you decided you wanted to do. If the surgeon feels we're going to be here for a while and they say, hey, let's go ahead and cool to 32, but you only cooled to 35, that can make a big difference. So,
Mhm.
we're talking about gold standard and CPB management here. If you have appropriate flow, keeping the temperature higher versus lower is not necessarily a bad thing. And, hypothermia on its own is very protective, but it is also potentially deleterious because cold coagulopathies are quite real. There's a saying, cold blood don't clot.
Yep. Yep.
And that is very, very, very true. You have a patient who is cold and they're bleeding, they appear coagulopathic. Sometimes it is as simple as temperature
Mhm.
related. Could be factor depletion as well, but temperature certainly contributes in a very significant way. Hematocrit, you want to keep it between 20 and 25% for normothermia, 18 to 22% for moderate hypothermia at 32 degrees. And, we really have to really consider what the metabolic reduction is. I mean, it's a very simple formula. It's a 7% decrease in overall metabolic demand for every 1
1
degree
degree.
drop in temperature centigrade. So a 7-degree change in your decrease in your temperature, if your core temperature is
Mhm.
actually that temperature, we're not talking about just blood temperature, right? And you're going to have a 49% or half, a significant reduction. Plus, you're under general anesthesia, you're paralyzed. There's a whole lot of things going on here where, again, if you just consider our formulas for determining what is the most appropriate flow, you can easily see that we are pretty much routinely overflowing most of our patients if
Mhm.
we're using hypothermia, even moderate hypothermia. Drifting, maybe not as much, but certainly with
Mhm.
moderate hypothermia, 32 and below. And then your pump flow, you want to match your VO2 needs rather than maximum available flow to minimize circuit-induced injury. So there it says it very clearly. If I don't have to flow 5 liters just because the protocol says I have to flow 5 liters to have an index of
Mhm.
2.2, if it's not needed, why do we do that? Every pass of the patient's blood through our
Mhm.
circuit is another moment of injury every single time. So, what are the organ specific thresholds for cerebral? A map of equal or greater than 65, 65 being an absolute minimum. We do cases all the time with pressures well below that, 50, 48,
Mhm.
56, 60, very, very, very routinely,
Mhm.
and pretty much get away with it most of the time. But, there are all kinds of strokes. There's those strokes where, grandpa is dribbling soup out of the corner of his mouth because he's had an obvious stroke. And then there's the subtle strokes, these ambiguous things that, grandpa just has never been the same person. And that's where this, I think, comes into play. We don't always see the obvious hemiparesis or
Mhm.
whatever else. You usually will see subtle changes in the patient. Greater than 70 is actually preferred. And this is looking at just a whole bunch of data. And a lot of this comes from Searles, but there's also Ranucci. And in this
Mhm.
particular case, I don't know how to pronounce that name, Deject
Reject.
or however you
Yeah.
say it. It's probably a Swedish name or something like that, one of those kind of names. But with that said, a lot of this data is uh, understood and comes from a lot of studies. These guys looked at a whole bunch of data and then condensed it, and then I've condensed it even further for the sake of this. Keeping your SVO2 greater than 70, flows at greater than 40 milliliters per 100 kilograms or per 100 grams of tissue per minute. Ischemic changes on EEG. If you're doing off pump cases, you have to be paying attention to that. And if you let your MAP get below 50, then that can be problematic. You're simply not going to be perfusing well enough the myocardium if you're doing off pump cases, on pump beating heart, so to speak. But a lot of times they can't see. The vessel is bleeding. There's collaterals, and they want that pressure to be lower. And that can certainly have, in the other vessels not being worked on, create an ischemic moment for them, right? Renal, you want it to be equal or greater than 60. So if you're worried about the brain, if you're only worried about the kidney, stay at 60. If you're worried about the brain too, stay at 65. And if they have atherosclerotic heart disease, doesn't mean they're going to have carotid disease, but they certainly do have arterial disease. And I just assume everyone that's coming in to have heart surgery has some type of cerebrovascular defects. Your flows at 100 to 120 milliliters per 100 grams of kidney tissue. Urine output, as I said, I think that's a poor surrogate. It's known to be a poor surrogate, but it is certainly something to consider. If you do have good urine output, doesn't mean you're really perfusing the kidneys great, but it certainly would lead you to believe that you probably are. But you can have high output renal failure as well, so you have to take that into consideration. You have an AKI risk that increases very sharply when your SVO2 falls below 60%. Remember, the glomerulus lives in a very hypoxic environment. Your PO2 there is sometimes as low as 25. So it's very, very, very low. Yeah. And the kidney is working all of the time. It never quits. So you can't just put the kidneys to sleep, so to speak, on bypass. And so you really do have to consider those. I mean, you look at renal failure rates across cardiac surgery. Stroke rates are, in my opinion, still unreasonably high. But renal failure rates, or AKI rates, we'll say, instead of renal failure, we'll say acute kidney injury rates, are extraordinarily high still to this day in perfusion, which I find very, very disconcerting. It hasn't changed a whole lot over the years. It was higher when we did bubble oxygenators and things like that. But over the past, I would say 20 years, AKI rates have remained pretty stable at an unacceptably high level. And I don't think we really spend enough time trying to figure this out. If you're doing off-pump beating, or not off-pump, but on-pump resting heart, you want to keep your root pressure 65 or higher if possible. Mm-hmm. Native coronary perfusion is going to be in play during the non-cross clamp times, and avoid contractility depression from inadequate DO2 to the myocardium if you possibly can. Makes their job a little harder, I do understand that, but if that's the case, then let's get the del nido and cross clamp the aorta and just stop the damn thing, which I just think makes a whole lot more sense, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. In fact, one of the things that I have always found very fascinating is that they believe, I've seen people say, oh, this guy's heart is way too sick for us to go on pump. Not even cross clamp, just go on pump. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Mm-hmm. You're going to be manipulating this heart, and anesthesia is going to give a bunch of drugs to give you a blood pressure which is totally artificial.
Yeah, it's fake.
Because you're going to have no flow. All you're going to do is make his SVR 3,000, and your heart is not going to be perfused well. So you're going to hurt it a lot more than if you just go ahead and go on pump, and then you can manipulate it without that fear, and we can control the other things as long as we're able to have enough flow and enough pressure. But your cardiac output is going to be so much better that way. Notwithstanding, the pump has its own morbidities, and I understand that too. So again, no perfect system, but I've never really understood the idea. Have you heard that before? Where I don't want to put this patient on bypass, and because the heart is just too sick to go on pump.
Yeah, recently.
And they do the case off pump, and it doesn't make sense.
Recently,
recently. How did
recently.
that turn out?
That was okay. I mean,
Mm.
the case itself was okay. Now, would it have turned out better if we were on pump? They're always worried about coming off, right? That's what they're worried about. They're always, oh, this patient won't be able to come off. Oh, this patient won't be able to come off. Well, no, like you said, if they do their job right, then
Well, if you don't cross clamp,
you don't. They didn't do that. We just
right?
bypassed.
So
When
don't cross.
we were on,
If you really feel that strongly about it,
yeah, warm beating,
yeah.
but no.
But if you can get good cardioplegia, Del Nido especially, I was not a fan of Del Nido. I've become a fan of Del Nido. I wasn't
Really?
a fan for a long time. Yeah, I was very concerned about it. I was concerned because of distribution.
It's good for the babies, Joe.
You give one, yeah, but they don't have a coronary disease.
That's a good point.
You give, yeah. I was always concerned about your ability to get good distribution,
Mhm.
and any area that doesn't get good cardioplegia may not be, the heart may not be moving, but that
Sure.
area is not necessarily protected.
Right.
And that's always been what bothered me about it, because we go such a long time, go up to
Yeah.
an hour
Yeah.
without giving any further dosing. Whereas with Pledgisol or whatever else, St. Thomas solution, whatever solution you use, you're giving it down each coronary and you're
Correct.
redosing all of the time.
Right.
So both, I think, I see an advantage of both. But if you are sure you can get really good global distribution of Del Nido cardioplegia for a coronary, give it antegrade, give it retrograde, and you
Mhm.
know your retrograde cannula's in right. You
Mhm.
measure the pressure.
Mhm.
You have your, you can't open the aorta just to
Mhm.
look and see it coming up both coronaries, but because that's what I'm afraid of.
Right.
Is you get it in too far, you don't go up the right, you only
No,
get it
yeah,
up
yeah.
the left.
Yeah.
But if you're giving both, I think you're almost better off doing it that way. Your anastomoses are going to be better, and the patient is going to be more stable overall. So I actually think you're better off going on pump and cross clamping, even with a really sick heart.
I agree with you with regards to the distribution. I just feel that you're absolutely right in the fact that you can't, especially on an initial arresting dose, when using Del Nido, we'll say, you can't really get good distribution because you're facing stenotic vessels to at least 90% or more.
Mhm.
So what are you really perfusing past the the stenosis? Not
Mhm.
much, right?
Not much.
Yeah.
If it's especially if it's a CTA
Exactly. Oh, if it's CTA, then you're not going past it at
or
all, right?
CTO,
Like
chronic
then
total occlusive CTO.
yeah, so
Yeah.
then you're not going past it at all. So I get what you're saying, with regards to Del Nido. I've always wondered that myself, but I don't know. I mean, we use it a lot, and people are turning out fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
I've
so
actually changed my opinion about Del Nido. I
yeah.
really like it. And then Splanchnick. The gut is so underappreciated for how sensitive it is to these low flow states. The brain is kind of one of those obvious things. The kidneys, they kind of become obvious too. But how many times have we had a patient in the ICU on ECMO, their heart's kind of recovering, they're starting to look better, and then the next thing you know, you have this refractory lactic acidosis, and nobody understands what the hell it's from, and the next thing you know, you find out you have a dead gut.
Mm.
It happens so
Mhm.
often, and what is sacrificed almost exclusively when it comes to hypoperfusion states is, in fact, the gut.
Mhm.
Your mesenteric infarcts from just low flow, or vasoconstriction from use of leave them dead. Levofed is leave them dead, which, it's a good drug, you need it, but norepi, or using whatever, you're doing resuscitation constantly,
Mhm.
and you have high dose epi, high dose levo, high dose neo, and the heart seems to be tolerating it. They seem to be waking up, but the next thing you know, you have a big infarct in your gut,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
die.
Yeah.
Yeah, very common. See it a lot. Optimal DO2 calculations and thresholds. There's the formula for DO2 and DO2I. Hemoglobin plays such an important, a huge role.
Mhm.
We accept this whole idea of not giving blood, and this whole idea of not using hemoconcentration. These are two of the most irresponsible things I have ever seen, And for whatever reason, there are a number of people in our community that seem to be on a crusade
Yeah.
of not transfusing
Yeah. It's silly.
and not hemoconcentrating.
It's silly
And they
because
have some of the absolute worst,
yeah.
most illegitimate evidence to support hemoconcentration being a cause of acute kidney injury. It is the most absurd thing I've ever seen. And I caution my young colleagues, whoever may be watching this, to please, please, please evaluate a lot of the data that you read uber critically. Don't just read something and say, oh my God, I didn't know that that would happen. We can't do that. You really have to look at things and evaluate them. And I will tell you that there is nothing more true than what your own two eyes tell you. So keep that in mind, please.
Like we had come across before, it's any real topic that is controversial or highly researched, you will always find 10 articles for it, but then you also find 10 articles against it, right? Like
Yes.
that's almost always the case.
Yes, and sometimes,
Like-
sometimes, and we had this discussion before,
Yeah.
it depends on what journal you are reading.
Exactly. Yeah.
It makes an enormous
Yeah.
difference.
Go back about
And,
3 PerfWebs ago, and Joe got into it pretty good.
Yeah, well, but at
Yeah.
the same time, sometimes the articles that they have are quite good. So I can't, I don't ever want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm just saying that you really have to look at a lot of data, and you have to evaluate it very critically, and then make your decisions about what you are going to do based on all available information that you deem to be credible, and then what your own eyes tell you. Because at the end of the day, if your outcomes are equal or superior to the best outcomes of the people that claim they never do those things, I think that that evidence, to me, in my own personal practice, is far more important than their opinion. That's how I feel about this. I think there are some things that you just don't do that ever. We all know that what those things are. But this is a controversial subject that I believe should not be controversial. Anemia is bad. Several things that we don't do, and it's not even in this lecture, but I'll have the discussion anyway. We don't measure COP. Now, COP
Never.
is a redundant term. We used to all the time. We wanted to keep it
Really?
between 25 and 28. Yeah, we used to measure COP all the time. It was a standard for us
I feel
back
like
in the
They
back in
can
the
at
old
least
days.
measure the albumin now. But
Well,
they don't even do that either.
and that
you
is
know?
a perfect surrogate.
Yeah.
Albumin
Yeah.
is
and that right. And it's easier to measure.
70% of your entire
Right.
COP.
Yeah.
So albumin is a great, and we just had a very interesting case. I can share this with you. This fella had arrested. He was a post-op heart, but it was many days post-op, and he just started to decompensate, and he ended up going to the cath lab for something, and then they arrested him there. I talked to the cardiac surgeon, who I think you all will see during the course tomorrow, Dr. Patel, a different Dr. Patel. You're all named the same. It's all Patel.
He's a nice guy.
He's Indian. He's Indian too, and everybody named Patel is Indian.
Yes, we are.
And all doctors from India are Patels. So unless they're Bhatias, there's Bhatias or Patels. And I actually think his real name is Bhatia Patel, but he doesn't admit it. I'll have to tell him that.
God,
someday.
I can't. Please tell him that when I'm there. I want to.
It'd be pretty funny, actually. I think it'd be pretty funny.
Oh Lord, have mercy.
But he was very aggressive with albumin, and he kept this patient's albumin up for about 4.5 to 5, 4.5 to 5, and they had CRRT going. And they removed about 7 liters of fluid from this patient, and the patient's intravascular volume was still great. Got all of the drips off, got the dude weaned off of bypass, and are off of ECMO,
Mm-hmm.
and he's in the critical care unit recovering. He's got renal function returned. So I've seen
Mm-hmm.
where this really does work, but they will argue with you. And if you look at the data, I did a lecture on this last week or whatever it was a couple of weeks ago. The data
Mm-hmm.
does not say that's
Yeah.
appropriate.
No.
There's
right.
no difference in outcomes if you use albumin or you use
Yes.
saline or some other crystalloid solution in outcomes with this big giant swath of patients.
I remember that.
All of these different categories.
Mhm.
But when you subset to that patient, then everything changes, and you
Mhm.
have to think that way. Your PO2 target should be 150 to 250. At normothermia, that's great. I run my PO2s. I run 100% on
You
my
sure do.
FiO2
I've
on
seen
my
your-
cases.
So
I
your
never
PO2 get up
change
to
it.
like 600 one time.
I have no problem with it being atmospheric. 740 doesn't bother me one bit.
It was like 597, I think, in one of the cases. I was
Doesn't
with
bother
you.
me one
Like,
bit.
oh, Lord.
Doesn't bother me at all. And if you look at the DO2 calculation, DO2I calculation,
It'll help.
albeit
Yeah.
dissolved plasma does not. Well, I can show you. I
No,
can
you
show
did.
you.
We did that on the. We
Yeah,
pulled
we
out
can
the calculator.
do the
one
app,
time.
and I can show you.
I mean, it's 0.003 multiplication, but that still
correct.
does. Right? I think we were able to raise it almost 15.
It
or
has
20.
it will make a difference. It
Yeah.
can get you past a threshold. So, I see I don't turn it down. I don't necessarily have a problem with people that do. I don't, because I think all oxygen is good. And I see
Until
no
it's
risk.
not,
People talk
Joe.
about
Until it's not.
microgaseous emboli, but that is not going to be the case. That's not true. It's and I can prove it's not true. However, and you can't prove it is true, so I would challenge anybody that wants to do that with me to come on the program, and let's have that debate if you so desire to. But I keep my FiO2 at 100% the entire case. Normothermia elective for your DO2I 320, not 280. I know that 280 is our minimum threshold, but 320 makes a lot more sense. And even that is still below. But again, we do have reduction in metabolic demand. Even if you're at normothermia, you're still paralyzed. You're still under general anesthesia. You're still in a reduced metabolic demand state. And so that 320 may very well be okay. If you want to be more luxurious, we'll call it 360. For moderate hypothermia, you can go down to 220, and deep hypothermia you can go down to 150. With deep hypothermia circulatory arrest, obviously you want to get yourself in a condition where you have super oxygenated all of your tissue beds, albeit you're going to shift your curve so far over to the right that you're almost going to have a hard time at that temperature releasing any oxygen to the tissue. So you just have to make sure they're really well oxygenated as you're continuing to decrease your temperature.
And it's to the left.
To the left, okay.
Not to the right.
I get it. Okay. Left, right. It depends on which way you're facing.
No, if you're decreasing temperature, you're going to the left.
If
Joe.
I turn turn the other way,
Audience,
it's to the
don't
right.
listen to him.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's 125% the left shift.
Okay, I knew at least it shifted.
Okay.
Normal VO2 is approximately 25 to 30. That's why our normal venous saturation is 75%. That's 25% of your arterial being 100 at 100. And so that's where that number comes from. That's what we extract. Our O2 extraction rate is roughly 25%. So how about just match that? That would be a really unique idea.
Yes.
Let's match our VO2 as opposed to this arbitrary number. Multiply, and then there's various different ways that you can achieve what you're trying to achieve. And this came with Searles and Ranucci. Ranucci is a world-renowned critical care medicine doctor, intensivist type person. Achieving optimal perfusion. What's your CPB initiation strategy? Well, Pre-bypass preparation, you want to know something about this patient. You want to know what their overall condition is, look at their body habitus, take into consideration their what their vascular condition is, consider what their renal function is at that moment, take into consideration if they've been at home or whether they've been in the hospital. Are they hemodiluted? Have they been essentially phlebotomized to a state of anemia already? Or is their anemia something that's from a different condition? How's their nutritional status been? What is their albumin level? Because I will tell you, if your albumin level is 2.1 or below, it is by all measure, all legitimate scientific randomized controlled trials, publications, is an independent indicator of predictor, rather, of mortality. So keep that in mind. And if your albumin level is 2.1 and you go on bypass, it's going to be 1.8 if you didn't put a whole lot in. And you're going to third space all of your volume, and that patient is going to come out looking like a completely wet, soaked
big old puffy
sponge.
guy.
Yeah, big old puffy guy. Then you have your CPB initiation, and I have worked places where it is. In fact, I work someplace now where it's okay, drain and go on. Okay, going on. We're going on bypass. Okay, flow down, and they're ready to put the cross clamp on. Well, I would suggest maybe having an offline conversation with the surgeon that you work with and say, hey, maybe it'd be a good idea if I got on bypass first and got kind of stable and saw what my volume status was going to be, how my drainage is, how the flow is going to be, if there's something we might have missed. I've seen people develop pump AI before where, next thing you know, you're on bypass, you clamp, you start giving the cardioplegia, and the heart's blowing up because it's all going through the aortic valve. That's another thing you want to look at pre-bypass. Do they have any aortic insufficiency? Are you going to have a problem? If it shows 1+ and it's pretty mild and nobody's worried about it, that's fine, but I'd be worried about it because it gets worse sometimes when you go on bypass. And
it's so much more volume.
Well, that and the way your flow is and things like that. You don't have just a passive flow coming back at you. You actually have a jet of flow coming out of a cannula filling that aorta up, and it can be worse. And you put the cross clamp on, and it can make it even worse than that because that's going to distort to some degree the aortic valve. It depends on how thick or how non-compliant that aorta actually is. So get yourself stable on bypass and then move forward with that.
You at least gotta wait until the prime washout phase happens. That's like the first 2 minutes. You at least gotta give it those few minutes. You know what I mean? Because your body is going through a lot in the first couple of minutes.
It is.
Your pressure just tanks.
Let's just give this a second.
Give it a second. Exactly.
Now, when I look before I go on bypass, I'm watching. I look and see what the patient's blood pressure is, and I kind of keep my eye on anesthesia, and I see how many times they're sitting there giving a little go juice, for pressure control or whatever. And if I notice that the patient's pressure's soft, I know a lot of people don't like that term, but if it's not, they're not hypertensive, but they tend to be running a little hypotensive, then I'll take whatever go juice I'm going to use on bypass, whether it be phenylephrine or norepi, and I'll put a cc or two in the system and spin it around and let it be in there. So when I go on bypass, I have that effect that's going to occur much more quickly than waiting until it completely tanks. I've already primed the pump with a little bit of go juice. So I do that pretty routinely.
Yeah. I know a lot of perfusionists that do that.
Yeah. And then you've got your first 5 minutes on bypass where you're just trying to figure out, okay, we've given pledge, the heart's arrested. I'm looking at everything, evaluating my pressure. What's that acting like? How's my flow? What does my venous blood look like? A lot of people use, and we use them too, continuous SpO2 monitors, but I just look at the color of it, and I can generally tell if it's looking brighter or not. I think my eye's better than the monitor sometimes. And we've actually tested that, and I get
Have
pretty
you?
damn close. Yeah,
Well,
I
I
do.
mean,
I
you
have a
got
lot
a
of fun with it.
40-year-old eye.
If I have
so
to
in
be
the
back
field.
there, if I have to be back there, I'm gonna at least enjoy myself. I can't
Well,
be
yeah,
back there
there you
just
go.
miserable that
Bored.
I don't want to be doing this case. I want to be doing something else.
Yeah.
Why I'm not sitting on the beach? Because I'm there. I'm stuck. Okay, you got to do your job. So if I'm gonna be there doing my job, I'm at least gonna have fun.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, and
Play these personal little games. while you
entertain
can.
myself. Yeah. And then what are you going to do? Temperature? Do we have my anesthetic gas on? Are we cooling? How
Mhm.
far have I cooled? So that's all the first 5 minutes. Kind of
Mhm.
get a feel for how this case is looking.
Mhm.
And of course, now your pledge is in. Now comes the fun part because now you want to optimize things. But at the same time, you want to optimize things. That's when the heart holder comes over and they grab the apex of the heart and they pull it all the way back.
Your pressure's
And they put their
30,
hand
you're
in
like,
there,
what
and
the
now
hell?
you're like, my flow has just gone to
Yeah.
shit. Everything is just falling apart here. Like I had the perfect case, and now everything is miserable. And they're going to do that vessel. What are we going to do? So you've got yourself fine-tuned in your phase 4 optimization period, but now you got to figure out what are you going to do. So we kind of went through all of this. I'm kind of skipping. So let me throw this slide in, and then we'll talk
Yeah.
about dealing with these conditions that come
Sure.
up. And then if you are doing temperature-driven metabolic management, your cooling phase, while you're cooling, you're going to want to keep your flow up. Then your maintenance phase, where you can start trimming that
Mhm.
down, keeping a really close eye again on your SVO2, because that is really going to drive if you are flowing your VO2.
Mhm.
If your extraction is higher than your flow,
Mhm.
your SVO2
That's a
will
problem.
fall.
Yeah, that's a problem.
And if your SVO2 falls, then your lactate will eventually
Increase.
go up.
Yep.
So I think we should measure lactates more commonly. Some of the blood gas analyzers now come with lactate on it, and some people will uncheck it, like to not measure it. Why would you do that? Just click measure everything and just look at everything and throw out what you're not interested in. But everything else can have some evidentiary value, and I think you need to take that into consideration. I think you should just look at everything that you possibly have available to you.
My very last case, the
Mhm.
one I did yesterday, we had a place that measured lactate, and
And you measured it.
anesthesia was pushing pressors in the background. I think I had told you about it. It was a little bit of a higher risk
Yeah.
case. My lactate started creeping up. I was able to tell the anesthesiologist, like, go ahead and, I need to increase my DO2, and I can't do that because the pressure's 80. So why don't you come down on your pressors
Yeah.
so I can go up on flow?
Yeah.
And let's not see if we can't get rid of some of this lactate. And I was able to do that, and we did.
Yes.
And
Well,
and
what do we do during NRP?
exactly, that's all we do during NRP.
Okay,
right?
we go on NRP, and
And it
our
was my NRP
lactates,
knowledge that made me think
our
this. I was like,
lactates
oh.
are 15.
Exactly.
We go on NRP, and our lactate levels are 15.
Exactly. And we bring those down.
And we don't even give any bicarb.
No.
We just flow.
Yeah, we just flow. Exactly.
Flow as much as you can
Exactly.
into the tissue, and the liver will clear it. Because
Exactly.
that's how we evaluate whether or not the liver is functioning.
Exactly.
So if we treat it, then we have to treat it
Yep.
appropriately, right? So we don't give we try to get the pH up. So we will give bicarb, but
Yep.
you have to be so careful with that stuff.
See, I was able to do all this because the place we're at yesterday checked the lactate.
Yeah.
It didn't creep that high. It got to 3, but even at 3, I was like, okay, no. I wasn't happy, especially with this being a high-risk patient.
Yes.
I was like, no, we need to do something about it.
Yeah.
You know?
That's
And I-
high.
that's
Something
high.
is something
That's
is
high.
not being perfused.
Exactly. And I was able to tackle that situation, deal with it, and we came out with like a 1.8 at the end of the case.
Mhm.
So it worked out. And the patient was good.
Sure. So
Hmm.
I'll go through this a little bit more quickly, but you have your maintenance phase, and then you have your rewarming phase. Well, your rewarming phase is you're going to start having increasing metabolic demand because you're rewarming, and so you have to make those adjustments. So you basically have these phases, if you will, of when you do a procedure that you have to be thinking, and it's better to think ahead how am I going to do these next steps? You should be 2 or 3 steps ahead of yourself. And at the same time, I will tell you that I think it's so critically important that people really pay attention to what's going on in the operative field, because that's going to give you a lot of information about what's going on and where they are in the procedure. If you can sit back there and not do that and essentially just wait to be told what the next step is that they want you to do, or you can proactively try to help them not screw it all up. Because believe me, when they forget to tell you something, there's going to be a not insignificant number of times that they're going to say, I told you to. And everyone in the room is going to agree that they heard them say it, even though they never did. Now, let's talk about when you are looking at monitoring of optimal perfusion and when you have what the things you should be looking at. There's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and this comes out of Searles. You want look at your SVO2, you want to look at your MAP, you want to look at your core temperature, your flows matching VO2, and your DO2I, you should be measuring that. You should also be looking at your volume. You should be taking into consideration are your third spacing? Are you having volume issues? If you are, where's the volume going? If it's third spacing, let's treat that and deal with it. So check an albumin level. Check a lactate level if you want to, just to be sure. But I can assure you, if your SVO2, unless you have an organ system that is being excluded from flow because of some other anomaly that you wouldn't be able to do anything about at that moment anyway, if your SVO2 stays above 70, your lactate levels aren't going to go up. Yeah. So, but again, there's nothing wrong with measuring it. I don't see any issue with it. And then if you were doing a closed system, a lot of these studies have been looking at closed systems where, like the old mech system where they didn't have a reservoir.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why you see this inlet pressure. I'll just talk about it very briefly, but there are places that do not use any pump sucker, do not use a venous reservoir. They only use a closed system. And so you have to pay attention to the inlet pressure so that you know your cannula is not getting tissue sucked into the holes. Then you have tier 2, something you do every 5 minutes as opposed to continuously. Are you looking at lactate trends, urine output or SVO2 trends? Are you making any urine? What's your CVP bin? If it's an open system, it should be 0 to 2. 0 really is most appropriate, I think. And then you have really good drainage. What your arterial pressure trends have been, and your oxygenator function, again, if you're looking at a closed system.
All that makes sense except for lactate trend. How can you check the lactate trend every 5 or 10 minutes? Who does pulls that many samples?
It depends on your technique that you're using. So if you're using a closed system technique, again, remember, you have to take into consideration that some of this data comes from places that use those.
Sure.
And their flows are very different. They live in a suboptimal state all the time. So they probably do check it that often.
Okay.
And a lot of this is also European. There's a lot of data in here from the European.
Q15, Q30, like over there.
No,
they're a lot faster.
I'm about Q hour.
Yeah.
Okay. I think
Q hour.
But if everything is going well and I know everything is good.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If I have a question or a problem or something that I'm concerned about, I want to know what that is. So I'm more of a PRN lab person
evaluating
than
the color of your venous line. Huh?
Correct.
That's what you're doing.
That's what I do. Yes. But no, in all seriousness, I think that's a really good point because, again, we have developed these protocols, and I don't really understand these protocols because I don't think you need to do labs every 5 to 10 minutes or every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes. I think you need to. How many times have you done?
Much as you need to do them.
Do them as when you need to do them. Exactly. If you have a question, you need to know something. Absolutely. You really should be able, by the time you've done this for 5 years, you should be able to do the case with maybe a 2-hour pump run with 2 labs. You should be able to, if everything is great.
Yeah, as long as right. Right.
We're
on that.
talking about, I've got great flow, I've got great volume, I've been able to hemoconcentrate. I know my hemoglobin was good, nothing
Mhm.
has changed. I haven't changed, temperature hasn't changed, my
Mhm.
gas flow hasn't changed, nothing has changed.
Mhm.
So really, what do we I call a lot of times we do these gases, I call them victory gases.
Mhm.
I want to show my gases were perfect when I came off bypass, right? How many
Same
times have
thing.
we done cases with anesthesia? They don't do a gas for 2 hours,
Yeah.
right?
I did
And
that
the
yes
patients seem to do just fine.
I did that yesterday, a victory gas. I
Yeah.
was working with a
Yeah,
surgeon that
that's because
likes the gas called out. I was like 7.4,
that's because
potassium's
you're
4.0.
yeah, because you're less than 5 years.
I'm much
After
less than 5 years.
yeah,
I need to win
after
my wins, Joe.
yeah,
Can I win my
yeah.
wins?
If he were the reason I don't go over there and ask questions is if he asked me that question, I would say where it should be.
Where it should be.
Uh-huh. Adequate for life. I'm ready to come off now.
He
And then
asked that too. Are you ready to come off?
that's right.
Yeah, we're ready to come off.
And then every 15 to yes, I've been ready to come off. I was ready to come off before you started this case. How about that?
Right went on.
Okay. Before I even got to this hospital, I was ready to come off bypass. Then there's tier 3 supporting things you do every 15 to 30 minutes, checking your temperature, making sure that you're within the parameters that is wanted for that particular procedure, best for that procedure. Your H&H, if you're greater than 90 minutes on pump, if something has changed, and maintain it. Of course, check your ACTs. You want to make sure we do that. We remain anticoagulated. And then your gases, for pH, base excess, and PaO2. Unless there's a maybe this in this tier 2, maybe they have continuous lactate sensors. I don't know. They may. I honestly don't know if they do or not. But basically, looking at your gases about every 15 to 30 minutes.
Sure.
That's the protocol, if you will. And then you have, I won't go through all of these individually in the sake of time. My second lecture is going to be so short that this isn't going to be an issue. But so we won't be really too bad on time. But you have acceptable suboptimal and unacceptable suboptimal. I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but we all have common sense. Yesterday, I was doing a case, and the case was going great. Everything was great. I couldn't have been happier. We went on bypass with a hematocrit of 32. The hematocrit was 28. I did take off a lot of volume, though. That patient was very severely fluid overloaded, yes. We ended up having to give an extra dose of Delnito, half dose, because the heart started to beat a little bit, but he was trying to get a graft sewn, and it was bleeding, and he's like, dude, he says, I can't see. And I said, the physician assistant, Jeff, super good guy, smart guy. He goes, well, try this. Try turning your vent off and then turning it back on, thinking that maybe it was just stuck. But I was like, okay, I'll do that, for whatever. I turned it off, turned it on. I said, did that make it any better? No. I said, okay, let me do something else. I'll try to help you out here. So I dropped the patient down all to an index of 1.5 plus or minus, maybe 1.4 to 1.5. And I said, and I turned and I left my vacuum where it was. And I said, did that make it any better? Yeah, it's better. And I said, okay, well, so fast, because my flow is compromised. It's acceptable for a while, but not for very long. So let's go. Yeah. And they got the graft done. And as soon as I saw him start to tie. I came back up on my flow, and it all worked out just fine. Patient did fantastic. Great. So that's an acceptable suboptimal state. Unacceptable suboptimal is obvious. You can't get to a flow that is acceptable, and you have an SVO2 that is 50 or 60 or 55 or less. You're acidotic, you're struggling, you are pouring volume in, and you're getting nowhere. That is everyone knows what unacceptable is, and you have to tell them, I can't do this. You have to stop. You have to communicate. There's sometimes you cannot fix it. You cannot, there's a saying, and I probably get in trouble for saying this online, but you cannot make chicken soup out of chicken shit. I don't care how hard you try. And sometimes you just have to tell them, I cannot keep doing this. I need help. Stop. Fix something. Do something. Whether it be put another cannula in, manipulate the cannula, change the position of the heart, you've got to do something. And you have to communicate it. And if they're not going to do anything, you have to document it for your own protection because there are things that can be quite detrimental and damage that patient. I'm not going to go over all of this. It's pretty obvious. You have decision-making algorithm for optimal versus acceptable suboptimal perfusion states. I'm not going to go over oxygenator compromise. Anemia, we've beaten that like a dead horse. Anemia, red blood cells, hemoglobin is the #1 factor for oxygen delivery.
It is.
Bar none. So you have to have an appropriate hemoglobin. This idea of having a hemoglobin of 16, 17, or 18 and not transfusing is absurd.
It's because flow is capped. You can only flow what you're getting, right?
Exactly.
Like,
What
there's
can
only
you
so
do?
much you can go up on it.
Correct. What can you do if you're in a suboptimal state and they can't fix it besides document it? Cool the patient. Start cooling the patient quickly. That's something that you can do which will benefit that patient tremendously. And just let them know, dude, this is way low. I'm cooling. And if they want to say, no, I don't want the patient cooled, that's on them at that point in time, and they do outrank us, so they can make that decision, but I'm going to push back as hard as I can, knowing full well that that is going to be protective. But that's the #1 thing you can do. You don't have enough flow, you cannot flow enough for this patient, then cool the patient. When optimal perfusion is not possible because of surgical manipulation, low cardiac output post-cross-clamp, prolonged hypothermia, anemia, oxygenator compromise, of course, that's in those closed systems. That can happen. I'm going to skip that. Clinical impact. Okay, there you go. Well, this is good. Sustained optimal perfusion carries with it an 8% morbidity, which is your best outcomes. Managed suboptimal perfusion of less than 15 minutes shows a still increase to 12% morbidity with minimal impact. When I say morbidity, we're saying, that the patient may develop a little bit of AKI. Doesn't mean they're going to go into acute renal failure. AKI and ARF are not the same thing.
No, they're not.
We want to avoid AKI, but you can't equate the two. They are very different.
They talk like they're the same, though, whenever a lot of these people, if you speak with them.
Yes, I know. Prolonged suboptimal perfusion, now that you'd get a big jump from, if it's for 15 to 30 minutes, it's 18%, but greater than 30 minutes is going to be a 28% increase in morbidity. And that is going to be, you're going to start seeing clinical evidence of that, where you may go from AKI to ARF. You may have more of a neurologic deficit post-pump. You are putting the splanchnic bed at risk. And then sustained poor perfusion, you got a 50-50 shot. You're going to have a 42% increase in morbidity. And this is an SVO2 of less than 60, but greater than 50, for the duration of the bypass time. So we're not even talking below 50. That's still, a lot of people are in that range for longer than I'm comfortable with. So I have seen that. Again, your best protection is to cool the patient. But look at the neurocognitive dysfunction, 30 to 50% incidence with significant suboptimal periods. So the brain does not like poor perfusion to it. And I think NIRS or cerebral oximetry monitoring should be mandatory. I used to not believe in that either.
Why?
Because there was an article that I read, Pumpkin or Patient, and they basically they did a study, and they took a living patient and they did cerebral oximetry and they got a range, and then they took a dead patient and they did cerebral oximetry and they still got a range, which was a number that was, and some of the times the number was acceptable. And then they took a patient that was dead and removed the brain and did cerebral oximetry, and it still showed at times a number that was acceptable. And so I didn't have confidence in it. But I think that they've improved the technology enough to where I think now it actually does have validity. So I've changed my opinion about that. Okay. Here's the articles that were used. Ranucci, Searles, he's up at SUNY, Bruce Searles, super good guy. The European Society guidelines, Van Dyke, how you pronounce his name, McGovern, and circuit-specific evidence. And there's my complete list.
Mhm.
And that's the end of my slides.
Right.
Okay. Now, you want to comment while I pull up my other slides? Maybe
Yeah,
you
I
can
mean,
elucidate to the crowd something good.
I bring up the case that I did yesterday a lot, because it had everything in it with regards to I had to change the way I was doing it. Magic was my PA, so he was there. He remembers it. It was just we had to down to, man. I even had like a really low at the beginning because it took us so long to go on. We even had a low ACT. Ended up going on. I remember telling Magic, I was like, man, we're gonna go on. We're gonna bottom this guy out. The ACT's gonna come back. It's gonna be like 300 something, 300, and it ended up being that. I came back at 378. Here I am dropping heparin in early. It was just it was a case that we had to do a lot of left turns, right turns. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It wasn't just the straight ahead case like we're used
Mhm.
to, you know.
Mhm.
And suboptimal conditions existed, but I had to do what I had to do, right?
Sure.
Like this
Yeah.
patient was sick. We didn't really have a choice.
Right.
We were warned by the surgeon from the beginning. He came in and he talked to the whole OR. He's like, this guy's sick. So we need to do what we can all do. He basically called me and anesthesia over to talk to him, told us this is the case. Let's have the balloon ready. Let's have everything ready.
Mhm.
So in that case,
Why not just put the balloon in prophylactically?
he didn't want to do that because he said he didn't want to jinx it. And we did that last week. I had another sick
I would.
patient ahead of time that we did do it prophylactically. That patient ended up on ECMO and since has been decannulated. You know about that patient. But this one, he didn't want to do it. And it's a good thing we didn't need it coming off. Everything was done well. Again, thrown some suboptimal, curveballs, but, I had to just adjust my perfusion strategy accordingly. And the patient turned out okay. So, yay.
Well, I think you're going to like this one. Okay. Preserving CPB circuit integrity, the lifeline for safe reinitiation. Okay. And this is evidence-based guidelines from AMSECT and the Society of Thoracic Surgeons. See, when AMSECT does something good,
Oh, my God.
when they do something good,
Lord have
I'm
mercy.
nice to AMSECT. I want everybody to see that. Okay.
Let's circle this date on the calendar.
It's rare, but when they do, I will bring it up. So, protamine causes rapid coagulation in the static open venous reservoir, creating an immediate risk of clot formation within the pump circuit. And it doesn't take a lot of protamine in the reservoir. It's sitting there static. It's a very low velocity, even if you're on pump and you're flowing 7 liters a minute, that venous reservoir is very low velocity. Flow is the same, velocity is very different, and that makes an enormous difference. If that happens, you lose your a clot's formed, your system is essentially unusable. How do you prevent this? Well, discontinue pump suckers during protamine administration immediately.
Oh, so not 30%, not 20%,
Well,
not 10%.
Let me tell you, okay, I have beaten Manny to death.
For the 30?
He hates me.
Yeah.
So I will say, as soon as they start protamine, let me know as soon as 30% is in. And he'll just take the pump sucker and just put it down. And just take the cell saver sucker and use it. Because I have made his life miserable. You really think all this risk was worth that 10 cc's or 20 cc's of blood? And if you had massive bleeding and you started sucking it over here with just 30% in, our pump is going to be destroyed. I'm not going to be able to go back on bypass. So let's, I've just worn them out. But that's the prevention. Static venous reservoir, especially if you're now off bypass and there's no flow through it at all. You could even be recirculating, I guess. But again, that's a very low velocity system. And it has heparin, and you put any protamine in there and that heparin is that's going to bind. How does protamine work? It rapidly binds, causing instantaneous coagulation in static circuit, forming fibrin strands and microclots throughout the reservoir. and then you can have complete circuit where it just turns to jello. And I have had that happen. If you've never had, I've had it happen twice in my career. One time was unintended. One time was intentional. And it was a dire situation. It's the unintentional one that I'll tell you about. We came off bypass, and the anesthesiologist turned around and grabbed the Protamine. It wasn't paying attention. The surgeon looked over and said, "Go back on," but didn't say it loud enough for the room. We were back on bypass, and he was monkeying around in there. And the next thing I knew, I had no flow. None, no flow. And I couldn't understand what was happening because there was no flow, there was no pressure, there was no nothing, but I had a reservoir full of volume. I was like, I've got a serious problem here. I don't know what's wrong. And I finally looked at the reservoir, and I kind of grabbed it and shook it, and it was just jello. It was just pure jello. And I was like, "Did you give the Protamine?" "Yeah, we were off pump."
Oh no. Yeah, no. Oh no.
And there was the chaotic,
He wasn't
tearing
told to
it
give
down.
He just gave it, or
Yeah.
oh
He
Lord have
was-
mercy,
yeah.
no.
Yeah. Well, that was the surgeon was really fast.
Sure.
There was never necessarily a lot of communication. Everybody kind of knew what they were supposed to do when they were supposed to do it. It was just simply at that moment, he put himself in a position to not hear, and he said what he said to me, not loud enough. And I didn't do what I normally do
And yell it out.
and
going
yell
on
it
pump.
back,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
And
sure.
so there's just a sequence of events that occurred to have that happen. It was devastating. The patient died, obviously. There's that safety practice. This is something that AMSEC's standard 12.1, cardiac suction discontinuation prevents catastrophic clot formation in the circuit, preserving circuit patency and viability for potential emergency reinitiation. And on the left, you see basically the practices that have fully adopted this particular standard, which I think is so incredibly important. We should all do that. Circuit preservation guidelines from the STS, the Society of Thoracic Surgeons, Society of Cardiac Anesthesia, and AMSEC was collaborated upon, and these are the things that they said. Timely discontinuation of pump suckers prevents circuit, but I think the level A evidence really is to shut the pump suckers off, stop using them as soon as the Protamine is hung. Don't even wait till it's started. Turn it off. If you don't have hemostasis, don't just, if you have that much bleeding, don't give the Protamine, fix the bleeding.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really at the end of the
Right.
day.
Because the Protamine's not going to fix it.
And then emergency circuit readiness is obvious. If it's not usable, if there's Protamine in it, it's not usable, and then it's not ready. Case for discontinuation, the evidence, circuit component, risk, consequence, and prevention strategy. Every single one: venous reservoir, arterial line filter, oxygenator, tubing, cardiotomy reservoir. You're going to get clot, more clot, massive clot. What is it going to do? It's going to make it unusable, impair it, failure, restrict flow, total failure. What's the prevention strategy for every single one per AMSEC? Suction off, suction off, suction off, suction off, suction off. I'll just say them all because AMSEC has this one 100% right. Our professional mandate says our circuit should be ready. We should have a Protamine protocol, and we are stakeholders in this, because if you've ever tried to tear a clotted pump down and reset it up with all of the chaos that's ensuing, knowing full well that this is futile and everybody is really, really upset and it's high stress, I think we are a major stakeholder and we should have a say in this. We have a responsibility for emergency preparedness. If you work at a place that doesn't want to do that, you should have another pump readily available so you don't have to tear it down. You just push it to the side and bring another pump in. It's going to be a lot faster than trying to tear it down and start from scratch. And then we are the stewards of our circuit. Preserve circuit integrity, discontinue pump suckers before Protamine. And I told you not to use the pump suckers after you started the Protamine, and we hear oops. So there you go. All right, what say you?
I had a I had a case when I was a student where they made us go to 40%. Again, just like you said, trying to get just a little bit.
I mean, that talk was almost
and
ridiculous.
we clotted the reservoir,
Mhm.
and my perfusionist that I was with took pictures of it, and luckily we weren't going back on bypass and all that 9 yards. It was okay, no problem, no harm.
But lesson learned.
But lesson.
What if
and
you
she-
had to?
She went and she showed the surgeon the pictures. Like, look, we freaking told you no.
Yes.
You said yes, and this is what happens.
Yeah, and if you had to go back on
and we
pump,
had to go back on, we're done. We would have had to wheel in the other circuit, like you said, and she knew. She sat there, dude, watching the reservoir with her freaking phone out, just waiting for it to clot off so she can snag that picture and go show it to him.
Yeah.
And she kept telling me, she's like, Samir, watch what's about to happen. Watch. They told us, because I can't say no. I'm a student. They just weren't listening to me. I did say no. I was like, no.
I mean,
can
you
we
may
not?
just
Can
be
we not?
you may be a student, just a student, if that's what you want to call it. But for God's sakes, you have a medical degree.
They don't care about that, Joe. I'm a student.
Mhm.
I mean, they're in a student capacity, and I did say no. I did voice my concerns. She also said no, but he's like, just
I mean,
a little bit.
it's like Daphne over there. She's how many years of experience do you have as an ECMO specialist? 5 years.
There you
5
go.
years.
See?
5 years as an ECMO specialist.
There you go.
And when she was a student, she had probably as much experience as certainly more experience than the residents did.
She probably had more experience than a lot of the people sitting next to her, because I know I did. Then at least a couple of the ones that sat next to me, but that's besides the point.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it happens quick, Joe, and I've seen it now, so I get it.
I like some of the newer generation, like Dr. Dr. Patel, another Dr. Patel, over at Luke's.
Yeah, I like
I
him
think
too.
that he's so collaborative. I like him. I like working with him.
He's level-headed.
He is.
He's very,
very
highly
reasonable.
intelligent too.
So now let's look at the last lecture. Is Impella or IABP? Which one when? You need to do one of these next time, dude. I've talked so much, my throat is sore.
Okay, I'll do it. Which one
so-
do you have next? Oh, the next one's ECMO. I think Vicky's with you, right, on the next one?
No, I'm doing one. No, I'm doing one next week, and it's the ECMO simulations.
I want to.
We're going to have a simulator here.
But that one, Vicky's coming here too, or is
Yeah,
she
to
not?
help.
Yeah, okay.
Just to help. But I mean, I think you would be great. Daphne, you would be great too if you want to do it, because it's just going to be basically simulations. Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, you both can. I mean, I think that'd be a lot of fun.
That one I want to come to just because I want.
That would be a lot
you said
of fun.
You're going to
Yeah.
use a Khalifa and everything like that.
Well,
or
that's
you're
going to be
try?
not for the one next week.
Oh,
We're going to
okay,
use our
yeah.
eigenflow for next week. The
Okay.
Khalifa is going to be used for the ECMO course, December 4th and 5th, the simulation
okay,
portion of that.
okay.
And you're welcome to do that as well.
Yeah,
And I think
that
you would
one-
find that because the Khalifa is look, the eigenflow is a good device. It was a lot more affordable. It's not a bad device. I'm not going to say it's a bad device, but the problem with Khalifa is it's DOS based and it's so damn hard to run. Yeah, it's really hard to run.
Our school had it.
but it's a good device.
I liked it.
It
It
really-
helped me a lot.
It is a good device.
I
And
was so much more comfortable when I got into my first case because I had done that.
Yeah, I believe it. And that's Richard Talman. He came out of Ohio State, and he's the one who developed that. It's just so complex to run, but comparatively, the other one's very simple, but it doesn't have nearly the level of sophistication or reality to it at all. Okay, so Impella or IBP, which one when? This data is coming out of the ACC, American College of Cardiology, STS, and the SCCM, which is the Society of Critical healthcare medicine
Mm.
guidelines for 2024 and 2025. I'm not here to tell you how the balloon pump works, and I'm not here to tell you how the Impella works. I'm assuming you all know how they each work. What I'm basically here to tell you today is which one should we be using when. And this is somewhat well, it's data driven because it's what these societies say. But I know there's a lot of people that feel very strongly one way or the other. But this is my opinion. Impella got bought. It's no longer Abiomed. It's who
Is it? I
bought
didn't
them?
know that.
Yeah, they got
Well,
sold. Who did Abiomed sell to? I mean, everybody always
man,
sells
it
to
must have happened
Medtronic, but I don't think it's
recently then.
Medtronic.
Here, hold on.
I don't remember who it was. You're going to look that up.
I'm looking it up
But I
now.
think you're going to like this next slide. Impella for the treatment of absolutely everything. When the Impella
Of
rep
course
is
you're pro
around, if the patient sneezes, Impella. If they sneeze and cough, you need the RP as well. So you need the CP and the RP both. And this, in my opinion, is what
Johnson and Johnson.
J&J
J&J.
is what was wrong with Impella, is that they pushed its use for everything. High risk PCI, a first line for failure to wean from bypass, never even taking into consideration any level of cardiogenic shock. And there was a whole bunch of papers written about why Impella should be your very first choice and really not use the balloon pump at all. I think it's very interesting that it's a side note, but we talk about pulsatile perfusion, and I've given several lectures on pulsatile perfusion and why pulsatile perfusion doesn't work. You can't create a physiologic pulse on cardiopulmonary bypass that has any meaning at all, and it's very deleterious because the
your
pressures.
argument is that the waveform is not the proper aortic waveform. Or
Well, it's not.
waveform.
It just isn't.
Right.
You're trying to
it's more
you're
just like-
trying to take something that is ejected from a ventricle into a 2.2 centimeter LV outflow tract into a 2.5, 3 centimeter aorta, and then going through the arterial tree. And now you're trying to put something that is 7 millimeters in a 3.5 centimeter vessel
and that
with 10 feet of tubing and an oxygenator interposed.
Correct. Yeah.
And tubing that is high will not expand, but can be. It has a level of compliance for squeezing, but not for expanding.
Right.
With a pump head that is not designed to. It doesn't work like it's a centrifugal pump. It's not a piston pump like the heart is.
Correct.
So you have all these things, and so the pulse is not in any way contributory to perfusion of the patient.
Correct.
But you are generating these exceedingly hostile pressures in your system. So moving on from here, are we having an issue? No? Okay. Device fundamentals, mechanism, hemodynamic effects, technical specifications of the balloon and Impella systems is what we're going to look at. Clinical evidence and data, clinical indications, recommendations, and conclusions. So intra-aortic balloon pump is a counterpulsation device using pneumatic inflation and diastole, and you're basically increasing diastolic perfusion pressure to the coronaries, increases coronary perfusion, and then deflates rapidly at ventricular ejection so that you reduce the afterload. So you increase oxygen delivery while decreasing oxygen demand. And we assimilate it to opening a door, pushing a door open while somebody's pulling it at the same time, and makes the door open much easier. It decreases LV afterload and wall tension, modest cardiac output improvement. You can get from 0.5 to 1 liter. So it really is not really that good for that. And the catheter is 7.5 to 8 French, depending on what size you use. And usually the insertion is via the femoral artery, though it can be put in directly into the aorta upside down or the subclavian, as a matter of fact. So you can do it a lot of different ways. So my what I was trying to say earlier was hell, I forgot what I was trying to say. I just remembered and then I forgot because I was in the middle of something. What was I talking about?
About what? When?
Earlier, before I went on to this with the Impella versus the So for pulsatile perfusion, the only actual increase documented and evidentially supported increase in perfusion to the kidney is using the balloon while on bypass as your pulse.
Yes, and that makes
that
sense.
has benefit.
Yeah, and that makes sense because
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
But not anything else. The
No,
pump
no.
doesn't do it. But
No.
having the balloon pump as creating a pulse actually does have benefit. Key advantages: it's well established with proven safety in specific applications, simplest insertion technique and shortest learning curve, lower bleeding complications than Impella, effective for mechanical complication support, reduced cost compared to newer devices, and widely available with a lot of clinical experience. For the axial flow pump, which is the Impella, mechanism of action is continuous axial flow from the LV cavity directly into the aorta. Direct active unloading of left ventricle significantly increases cardiac output depending on the size from 2.5 to 5.5. If your RV is pumping blood over there, you have to take that into consideration. Obviously, reduces LV and diastolic pressure and wall stress. Now, I will say, I think using Impella for venting the LV when on VA ECMO so that you don't develop intracavitary clot is a very good idea.
Oh, yeah.
And to keep the ventricle from being distended. So I do think it has use.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, keep in mind, I don't think that I don't believe in one over the other necessarily.
No,
What I believe is one should be used under circumstances where it should be used, and the other should be used in circumstances where it should be used, where the other one is not appropriate. I don't think you should just jump from problem to Impella without considering balloon as an intermediate step. Improves systemic and coronary perfusion pressure, multiple modes. You have the CP. I've never seen 3.5 liters out of a CP. I might have seen 3, maybe, but not ever 3.5.
Rated to, but
and the 5.5 gives you 5 liters, but I've never seen 5 liters either. I've usually seen a lot less than that, down to about 4, maybe 4.2. Those are always optimal numbers in lab settings. More complex, major bleeding rates, 31.3% versus 16% with a balloon pump. Higher peripheral ischemic rates, requires a larger sheath, 13 to 24 French versus an 7 to 8 French, which I showed you earlier. Hemolysis is very common, and arrhythmia is very common as well because you're tickling the intraventricular wall. More technically challenging to insert, clearly. Hemodynamic comparison, minimal direct cardiac output improvement with the balloon. Main benefit is diastolic augmentation with mild afterload reduction. Mean arterial pressure may decrease, requiring vasopressor support, but that doesn't really make sense to me, but it's what they say. This came out of the ACC. You may, in fact, see a mean pressure drop, but the mean pressure is an anomalous pressure because of the decrease in diastolic pressure that you're getting from the balloon deflation. So I don't think that makes a lot of sense. I think you want to look at your augmented diastolic pressure and your assisted aortic systolic pressure as a guide for what your hemodynamic status actually is. Systemic perfusion. Impella provides superior systemic perfusion through increased cardiac output, better for profound shock states and severe LV dysfunction, more effective for multi-organ protection. I agree with that 100%.
It's a pump, homie.
Robust direct cardiac output enhancement with the Impella, and coronary perfusion. The IABP increases coronary perfusion via diastolic augmentation. Beneficial when atherosclerotic disease is present because you can get that pressure head to drive it across the lesion. Effective during cardiac events with preserved native output. So if you have an ischemic event and your ST segments are looking bad, maybe even tombstone-ish, if you will,
No.
or maybe not quite that bad, but leading that direction. Sometimes the balloon pump is just enough to get you past that without having to go full-on Impella. So you're having a much decrease in cost and risk associated with that. So it should be, when appropriate, the first line, as opposed to just jumping straight to Impella. That is what I believe. Contraindication, both are relative for severe AI in the IABP, but the Impella, it is absolute. However, it's still going to be problematic with the balloon pump. It's just relative. Severe aortic stenosis is relative and absolute. I think that it's between the two. I would rather have AS in a balloon pump than AI in a balloon pump, but it's the data says that it is a relative contraindication, whereas with Impella both are absolute.
Yeah.
If you have a mechanical aortic valve, again, it's a relative risk, but it's absolute. Again, with Impella, peripheral arterial disease, relative, but can be absolute, relative or absolute with Impella. LV apical thrombus, relative but absolute with Impella. So you can't put it in if the thrombus is already there. And aortic dissection, both are absolute contraindications. 30-day mortality comparison, IABP Shock 2. You don't see a huge difference in survival. In high-risk PCI, you see an advantage with Impella over just the balloon pump, but that advantage is it's significant, but it's again relative. If you look at the all of the RCTs, meta-analyses that have been done, randomized controlled trials, you can see there's really almost no difference in 30-day mortality. And this is all comers. You're not subsetting to subset to subset to subset. And that's something that is very important. You have to choose the right device for whatever patient. But when you're doing these studies as RCTs, you're taking all comers, and it's not necessarily going to be reflective of the patient that is in front of you. There's a lot of times you're going to look and say, no, I don't care what the RCT says. This patient's getting an Impella.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because it's the more appropriate device. We know what the outcome's going to be with the balloon pump. And that makes RCTs very challenging to do. It's one of the difficulties that a lot of these researchers have, is basically the randomization compliance. And then you have, for STEMIs, the IABP is actually better. And I think that's very important. No clear mortality superiority for either device in most scenarios, which is what I just said. Right. You have to look at clinical context and patient selection are paramount, and those were my words. Impella advantage, better outcomes in non-emergency high-risk PCI, improved survival, reduced MI, and less cardiogenic shock occurred. And, but both are still pretty low as opposed to some of these others, which, as you can see, are quite high. Complication rates, I won't go through them, but you have the bleeding, limb ischemia, stroke, thrombocytopenia, overall vascular complications. It's a whole lot worse with the Impella than with the balloon pump. But again, sometimes the balloon pump is the right device, so it doesn't matter. And keep that in context, please. When to use IABP, optimal indications, mechanical complications of AMI, post-infarct, including VSDs. So if you have a VSD developed from a septal infarct, pulmonary muscle rupture, acute mitral regurg provides bridge to definitive surgical repair. Post-cardiotomy shock, transient myocardial stunning after CABG surgery, IABP is first line for temporary hemodynamic support and unloading, and these are the recommendations from the societies. Elective planning, high-risk PCI, prophylactic support during high-risk procedures in patients with preservative obstruction, but significant disease. They still believe that using IABP is appropriate, and then bridge to ECMO support. IABP with VA ECMO for unloading reduces mortality. Current guidelines for IABP over Impella when combined with ECMO. Okay, so current guidelines favor balloon pump over Impella on VA ECMO. Keep that in mind. That's very important. And again, this is from the ACA, the STS, and the SCCM. This is their data. Impella, cardiogenic shock, primary acute decompensation, profound shock, cardiac index less than 2.2. That's what we flow, requiring robust mechanical support beyond IABP capability. That's the key indicator. Do we need more mechanical support that the balloon can give us? And you need direct LV unloading is going to be beneficial for this patient. If you need those two things, then you should go with Impella. Prophylactic support during planned complex PCI in patients with an EF of less than 25% going in and extensive CAD. There are documented better outcomes than balloon in non-emergency settings. These circumstances, again, subsetting until you get to these patients. Ventricular arrhythmia ablation. Impella maintains pressure during the procedure. And while all of these arrhythmias are taking place, because you're going to have cardiac out and the balloon pump cardiac output support, whereas the balloon pump, as we know, is not going to work when you are inducing a bunch of arrhythmias. It can't work, right? Bridge to definitive therapy, bridge to transplant, LVAD. Certainly, these are circumstances where if you're that far gone, your heart is in that bad a condition, then Impella is certainly a more appropriate device. Your decision algorithm is here, and you can look through this, but you have mechanical complications, severe LV dysfunction, yes or no, contraindications, elective versus emergent, and ECMO in combination. So you can review these yourself and see what would work. Here's the 2024-2025 guidelines summary, and you can see here that IABP is in the 35%, the Impella at 30%, elective PCI with balloon is at 15, Impella is at 12, and ECMO-based support is at 8. It says here on their recommendations, judicious use of Impella with caution against overgeneralization. IABP use decreasing but remains appropriate in specific preoperative scenarios. I agree with that. Cost effectiveness, a balloon pump costs between $3,000 and $5,000. An Impella costs somewhere around $70,000. I think it's $70,000. No, is it $70,000? How much is an Impella? Is it $35,000? About $35,000.
Like for the 5.5
Yeah.
you're talking? I know the 5.5 is a lot more expensive.
It is?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very, the cost difference, oh, here, Impella cost 20 to 30, oh, it's right there,
Yeah.
20 to 30, I'm sorry, it's right there, 20 to 30,000, higher complication rates in Impella.
Like the CP costs considerably
Total
less
cost, no
than the
clear
5.5.
mortality benefit justifies cost difference, and guidelines emphasize selective, not routine use. And clinical training experience, the balloon is so easy to put in. I mean, I could, give me vascular access, and I could probably even do that too, but give me vascular access and I can put an Impella in. I know how to, I mean, a balloon pump in. I know how to do that. It's not hard.
No.
An Impella, totally different scenario.
Yeah.
Don't give that to me. It's going to be ugly.
No,
I don't know where it's going to end up.
Yeah, placement is of the absolute, like,
Yes.
like it's where it unloads.
Yes.
And
That's out of
yeah.
putting a balloon pump in. That's easy. Something that you do get with the Impella, though, is telemedicine guidance, which is increasingly available, which I think is very interesting. But if you need that, then maybe this device is not for you. Key takeaways: no clear superiority, institutional context, know your patient, number one. I've said that how many times today? That's been my central message today.
Yeah.
My talks today should have all been combined into know your patient.
Right.
And then complication burden. And each of these you can see are basically, favor intra-aortic balloon pump. But again, you have to take into consideration that Impella is appropriate in appropriate selected patients. It is the right device in the moment. And I think that that's my thing. That's actually my last slide. Before you take them down, I want to just go right back to this, if I may.
Nice.
This is the problem with Impella. That's the only problem with Impella.
It's for everything.
But it's not. And I think we need to start recognizing that. I always appreciate the enthusiasm of the reps that I come in contact with, and they're so excited, and they I've watched them push physicians into making a decision to use Impella, and some of the reps are lovely. I like many of them, but it is a culture, a company culture, and maybe Johnson and Johnson will change that,
Mhm.
but probably not because they spent a lot of money on it, made somebody really really rich, several people really really rich, and they're going to want to get their money out of it. So you know, I can only hope.
They did spend a lot of
Okay,
16 billion or something like that.
yeah, a lot of
A
money.
lot of money.
Thanks, David. Okay, I'm done talking. What say you?
I mean, you've hit it on the head, and like I said at the end of the last one, and it's important that your central message is what people absorb mostly. That it's about the patient. It's not about numbers. It's not about guidelines. Nothing. I mean, down to like you said, everything. And I have said it many times myself during my lectures, right? Like,
Hmm.
it's all about the patient. You know, read the room.
Hmm.
There you go.
Well, this is, I think, what not to change subjects, but in the few minutes that we have remaining, it's this is one of those things that when I hear discussion about automation or I hear discussion about AI
Oh Lord.
and using those tools, whether it be robotics
Hmm.
to run the pump, so much of what I do on any given day is just a feel. It's just a
Hmm.
it- it's judgment. It's
Yeah.
just it's what can I get away with here? Now maybe I guess there's probably some way that you could mathematically quantify that so that a computer could be
Oh,
programmed
like your
to
decision making
make those
process, you mean?
decisions,
Like,
but but I don't know. I don't know if you can do that. I don't know. I don't really fear because I mean I think this is something that some people are concerned about right now. In fact, I'm gonna have. I know I'm gonna have Ed Delaney,
hmm
the chief over at up at Hofstra,
hmm
and Bruce Searles up at SUNY,
hmm
both of them to talk about the future of our profession, which has been my profession for many many years, a
hmm
very long time, and it's a beloved profession. It's done so much for me. I've been given so much opportunity
hmm
because of this profession,
hmm
and and I think that there's concern about are we going to lose our place to some type of automation, some type of robot, some type of AI algorithm, some type of heart lung machine that can be managed from somebody else than somebody that's there physically. I don't know. So I don't believe so. To be completely blunt, I don't believe you can create a device, a computerized device that can think the way I think, or the way
hmm
you think, or the way Daphne thinks, or the way David thinks, or the way Magic thinks.
hmm
We have this feel, this sense,
hmm
this it's an art form.
hmm
And I think AI can create art,
No,
and some of it's quite nice, but
we're all different.
none of it will be Da Vinci.
No, it's all like we all pump
None
differently,
of it will
right?
be Van Gogh.
No, exactly.
None of it will be Dolly.
No, you can't because each person is unique, and the system would not be unique. It would be universal, and
Exactly.
that's how you know right there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I don't think so.
yeah.
I don't think so. So I feel still very good about the durability, if you will, of our
hmm
profession. I think our profession is going to be around for many, many, many years to come.
hmm
I think it's easier to replace a surgeon with a robot than it is to replace a perfusionist.
It all comes down to exactly like we said. The research can be both ways. So what do you write the rules of the AI to do?
Mhm.
Do you write it to give the albumin, or do you write it not to give the albumin? Because there's articles for both. Or, there's studies that show no difference, like you alluded to earlier today, and we've covered before in the past. So how do you write the robot to do its roboting, right? Like, and then who writes it?
Mhm.
You have AMSEC, you have ABCP, you have the STS,
The Academy.
you have the Academy, you have all these. Who sits down and says, "This is how we want this robot to pump"?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very
Yeah, because I'm sure there's Daphne. You can chime in on this if you want. You're hiding back there. I can't wait till we get you up here.
I know.
I
love how you called her out, though.
But
That's
but if you do you well, you can't see her. They just know she's
she didn't want to
there.
be seen.
She's just a figment of my imagination. There's really not anybody there.
That was her thing.
But in all seriousness, there are probably people that come in and work with me and do a case with me and leave horrified and go, "What the hell is he doing?" There probably are. But I've left people's cases before and just went, it's amazing how durable the human body is. I don't know how they're enduring this. I mean, I'm sure they probably think that. And it's funny, in a way, because if you don't think you're not the best, then you shouldn't be doing this job.
Absolutely. That's 100%
we
correct.
all believe we are the best.
Yeah. I'm brand new to the field, and I think I'm damn good.
There you go. There you go. There you
brand
go.
new to the field, and you
What do
can't
you
tell
think?
me otherwise.
You do? But that doesn't mean you're not the best. That doesn't mean you're not the
Yeah.
best. But that's an element of being the best.
Exactly. That is an element of being the
As
best.
long as I've been doing this,
Yeah.
I have phoned a friend more times than I can
Absolutely.
remember.
I phoned Joe so many times.
Correct, but that's part of being the best.
Yeah, that is part of being the best.
That's using judgment.
Not everybody knows everything, and that's key. You have to know that you
The
don't
more
know
I
everything.
know,
Yeah.
the less I know.
Absolutely. You can't. Part of being you're right. Part of being the best is knowing that you don't know everything.
Yes.
Phoning a friend, like you said.
Yes.
Getting input from people that might know more about any particular subject than yourself, right?
Yes.
Because there's no way you can know it all. And the
I
minute
know.
you think you do, well, now that patient's in trouble.
Well, now you're done.
Right?
That's what you think. When you don't think you
Yeah.
have anything left to learn, that's when you should retire. That's when you have to retire. So I'm just going to make a statement right now. I don't think there's anything left for me to learn. I'm retired effective right now. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye.
I'm done.
All right. We'll see you next week.
Yep.
For we're going to be doing ECMO simulations here in the studio. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be looking at circuit flows and circuit pressures and various different conditions that occur, from hypovolemia and chattering to issues of VA ECMO and Harlequin syndrome, and how to correct for that, and what to do when you have recirculation using the transonic ELSA meter, which I think should be a standard of care for every ECMO patient. And you'll be seeing that tomorrow or next week as well. So tune in for that. And it was great seeing you. We're going to have, I believe Daphne's going to want to do the simulations next week with me. So you'll get to actually see that she exists.
Yeah.
She's not just imaginary in my mind.
Figment of
She's
our
actually
imagination.
really there. And I believe
I'll
that
do
my
one
good
of your
friend,
lectures probably obviously not the ECMO one. I don't. That's not me. But the one after that, I might do those to give the audience a break from listening to you.
yes, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. I don't blame you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I'll probably tackle those.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much. Once again, always good to work with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you all very much. We will see you next week, Wednesday, same time, same channel. And keep an eye out, because I'm going to be sending notifications out to everybody about the new MediWeb network, which will have PerfWeb in it. We'll have Paging Dr. Samir. We'll have You're Grounded from Becky Bolkovac. We'll have Jeopardy from Mindy Navarrete.
Yep.
And before I go, however, if I could have your attention just 1 second, I do need to tell everyone that Juan, who was scheduled for this course and several other courses moving forward, Juan Navarrete,
Mhm.
I did not want to remove his name from the cards, and I'm not going to. I'm going to leave it there. But he was an extraordinarily great perfusionist, very, very, very intelligent, and did a lot for our profession and teaching people as far as being a trainer. And also, he gave me, I learned a tremendous amount from him as well. He had a very dry sense of humor and kind of a dry affect, but was just truly decent human being. But he passed. And for those of you who may not know, Mindy Navarrete, who is also with us and who you'll see on these programs, is his surviving spouse. And so I would appreciate it if you would keep both Juan and Mindy in your prayers. It would mean a lot to me, and I appreciate that very much. I didn't want to leave today without mentioning that, but I'm not going to remove him from any of the agendas that have already been published. I'm going to leave that on. So I appreciate your understanding in that, and appreciate your thoughts and prayers for both Juan and Mindy. Thank you, and I'll see you next week. Bye.